We hear all the time, right? Like all the time about how overeating is just about pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
It's like those super tempting foods, those, not so healthy things that we all crave sometimes. It's
Yeah, man.
like our brains are just hooked on that dopamine hit. They're like, give me more.
Yeah, totally.
But, and this is where things get really interesting, the research we've been diving into from UC Berkeley,
Oh, yeah, I saw this.
it kind of throws a wrench in that whole idea.
Interesting.
It's pretty wild, actually, so let's break it down.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
So this deep dive is all about this new neuroscience study.
Okay.
And it's really looking at the connection between how much we actually enjoy eating and, well, the big issue of weight gain.
Right.
And the sources you gave me, they lay out some really surprising stuff that these researchers found, and they were looking at brain activity in mice.
Interesting.
So for everyone listening, our mission today is to really try to understand what the study found
Okay.
and what it could mean for us, for understanding how we manage our weight. Because forget all that talk about willpower, just needing more willpower.
Yeah.
This research is hinting that maybe it's something more than that.
I see.
Like maybe over time, our brains actually change how they react to food.
Okay.
And that could be like a huge part of why some people struggle with their weight.
That makes sense.
And here's the kicker. Get this. The study found that when mice were on a high-fat diet for a long time, like a really long time, the pleasure they got from eating it actually went down.
Huh. So it decreased?
Yeah, decreased.
Wow.
And that reduction in the brain's reward response, it might actually be a factor in obesity.
Really?
It leads to what the researchers called like a habitual kind of joyless eating.
Oh, wow. So they're just eating to eat.
It seems like, yeah.
Okay.
See, that's what's so crazy.
Yeah.
We're so used to hearing that it's all about the intense pleasure.
Right. The dopamine.
Exactly, the dopamine. Like, that's what makes us want more and more, especially with those super rich desserts and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
But this study is saying, hold on, maybe over time that intense pleasure actually fades for some people.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you think about it like those really appealing foods, they sort of hijack our brain's reward system.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And that makes us eat way more than we need to.
Like, just one more bite. Even though you're stuffed,
Exactly.
we've all been there.
But this new research is suggesting that something else might be happening over a longer period.
Okay.
The UC Berkeley team, they observed that in some people who are obese, the pleasure they get from eating actually becomes less intense.
Really?
Yeah, it's like the brain kind of gets used to the reward and it doesn't react as strongly anymore.
So less pleasure over time.
Yeah, and the source mentions some clues from human studies too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they used brain scans and people even reported it themselves. So there is some evidence to back this up.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
So it's like that initial rush of pleasure when you first eat something delicious. It might actually trigger changes in the brain that eventually make eating less rewarding, but then the person keeps eating anyway.
Right, it becomes a habit.
Yeah, exactly. It's a whole different way of looking at it.
It really is, and the researchers really wanted to understand why this happens.
Yeah, of course.
And that's where this brain peptide called neurotensin comes in.
Okay, neurotensin.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest, I'm no brain scientist, so break that down for me and for everyone listening. What is it, and what does it have to do with all this eating and pleasure stuff?
All right, so think of neurotensin as this little messenger in your brain.
Okay.
It's a small protein that basically helps brain cells talk to each other.
I see.
And the key thing here is its role in boosting the dopamine response, specifically when it comes to food rewards.
Okay, hold on. Rewind that a little bit.
Sure.
So when you eat something you enjoy, neurotensin helps amplify that pleasurable feeling.
Precisely. It's like it turns up the volume on that yum signal your brain sends out.
I love that, like an amplifier for pleasure.
Exactly.
That's a great way to put it.
So what did they find out about neurotensin levels and obesity in these mice? Well, they found a pretty consistent pattern. The obese mice, they had much lower levels of neurotensin in specific parts of the brain that are really important for processing those food rewards.
So those areas that are like, this is good, give me more.
Exactly. And they were particularly focused on a pathway between two specific areas.
Okay.
The lateral nucleus accumbens, think of that as like the brain's wanting and liking center.
Okay.
And the ventral tegmental area, which is a major producer of dopamine, the feel-good chemical.
Right, right.
So it seemed like the communication along this pathway was weaker in the obese mice because they had less of that neurotensin.
So less neurotensin equals a weaker pleasure signal when they're eating.
Exactly. And this helps explain a really weird thing they noticed about these mice on the high-fat diets.
Okay, what's that?
So back in their regular cages, they definitely preferred the high-fat food. They'd eat it all the time and gain weight.
Right, sounds familiar.
But get this. when the researchers offer them these super tempting high-calorie treats.
Okay, like what? Like little mouse cookies or something?
No, not quite. But think pure butter, peanut butter, even chocolate.
Wow. Okay, seriously tempting stuff.
And they offered it in a way where the mice didn't have to do anything to get it, no effort required.
Okay.
And the obese mice, they were way less interested compared to the leaner mice.
Hey, so the mice that loved the high-fat chow weren't that into the super delicious treats.
Yeah, isn't that strange? You'd think they'd be all over it.
You'd think so, right?
It's like, where's the joy in eating for them?
Yeah, that's so counterintuitive.
It is. And this lack of interest in what the researchers called hedonic feeding,
Right.
eating just for the pleasure of it,
Right.
it was a big question they were trying to answer. Like, why would these mice who clearly preferred the high-fat food in their everyday life suddenly be like, I'm good, to these amazing, readily available treats?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And the lower levels of neurotensin, that seems to be a big part of the answer.
So they weren't getting that same pleasurable kick from the treats anymore.
Right.
Okay, so they found this connection between low neurotensin and less pleasure in the obese mice. But how did they know for sure that neurotensin was the key player here?
All right, so this is where it gets really cool. They wanted to see if increasing neurotensin levels could reverse these effects.
Oh, smart.
Yeah, so they tried a couple of things. One was simple. They switched the obese mice back to a normal, healthy diet for just 2 weeks.
Okay.
And amazingly, that was enough to bring their neurotensin levels back up to normal.
Wow, just 2 weeks. And what happened when their neurotensin levels recovered?
Things started to change in a really good way.
Like how?
The mice started enjoying food again, their eating patterns became more normal, they weren't overeating as much, and they even started to lose weight.
So their whole relationship with food changed just by getting that neurotensin back up?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's incredible.
It is. And they also used some genetic techniques to specifically increase neurotensin production in the obese mice's brains.
Okay, and did that work too?
Yeah, they got similar results when they artificially boosted the neurotensin. The mice seemed to like their food more. Their eating habits balanced out, they lost weight, and they even had some other improvements too.
Really? Like what?
They showed less anxiety and moved around better.
Huh. So it wasn't just about eating less. It was about changing how they experienced eating.
Yeah, and that change was driven by getting that pleasure response back, thanks to the neurotensin.
Wow. So this neurotensin, it's kind of a big deal.
It seems to be, and the researchers believe that having enough neurotensin is crucial for keeping that desire for high-calorie foods in check and for regulating our eating behavior in general.
So it's like our brain's reward system needs to be working properly for us to have a healthy relationship with food.
Right.
That makes sense.
It does, and this has some pretty big implications for how we think about weight management.
Like if a lack of pleasure can lead to obesity, could that change how we treat it?
Absolutely. The researchers think that these neurotensin pathways could be targets for future obesity treatments.
So instead of just focusing on making people less hungry, we might be able to help them enjoy food in a healthier way.
Exactly. It's about restoring a normal, balanced response to food.
And that could lead to treatments with fewer side effects, right? Because
Yeah.
you're targeting the specific part of the brain that's involved.
Exactly. It's a much more refined approach than what we have now.
This is all really promising, but this study was in mice. How do we know if these findings will apply to humans?
That's a great question, and it's something the researchers acknowledge too. What we see in animals doesn't always translate directly to humans,
Right.
but what makes these mouse findings so interesting is that there's some evidence from human studies that suggests a similar pattern.
You mean like people saying they don't enjoy food as much?
Yeah, things like that. And there's even some brain imaging data in people with obesity that hints at a blunted reward response to food.
Interesting. So the mouse study is like a good starting point for looking into this further in humans.
Exactly.
So what are the next steps for the UC Berkeley team?
They've actually developed a detailed genetic profile of the specific neurons that produce and respond to neurotensin.
Okay.
And they've seen how these neurons change when the mice are on a high-fat diet.
Wow.
So now they're going to dig deeper into the biological pathways that are connected to neurotensin to find even more precise targets for potential therapies.
So they're like mapping out the whole network of what's going on.
Yeah, it's like they found one important player on a team, and now they want to understand how everyone interacts.
I see.
And it's not just obesity. They're also interested in the role of neurotensin in other conditions, like type 2 diabetes and eating disorders.
Wow, so neurotensin could be involved in a lot of different things.
Yeah, it seems like it. And they also want to look at how these reward systems work in different situations, like when someone is starving.
That makes sense because how our bodies respond to food changes a lot depending on whether we have enough to eat or not.
Exactly. So this whole neurotensin mechanism could be a fundamental part of how our brains manage our relationship with food overall.
This deep dive has seriously made me rethink everything I thought I knew about obesity.
Yeah, it's pretty groundbreaking.
It's not just about willpower or wanting unhealthy food too much.
Right.
For some people, it might actually be the opposite, like a lack of pleasure that leads to overeating.
Exactly, and that's a huge shift in how we understand this issue.
So to sum it up, this research is saying that the core problem in obesity might not be too much pleasure from food, but rather a loss of pleasure caused by changes in the brain.
Yeah, and the reduction in neurotensin seems to be a big part of that, especially when it's driven by eating a high-fat diet for a long time.
And this reduced pleasure, that's what might be driving people to overeat, maybe out of habit or because they're searching for a reward they're not getting from the food anymore.
That's right, and this finding could totally change how we approach treating obesity in the future.
It's exciting to think about treatments that could help people rediscover a healthy enjoyment of food.
Yeah, instead of just relying on willpower or restrictive diets.
So here's something for everyone listening to think about. What if our current ways of dieting and losing weight, which are often all about cutting back and restricting,
Yeah.
what if they're missing a big part of the puzzle? What if they're not addressing these changes in our brain's reward system?
It makes you wonder.
What if helping people experience a normal, healthy pleasure from nutritious foods?
Yeah.
What if that's the key to long-term healthy eating? It definitely gives us all something to think about.
Food for thought, for sure.
Absolutely.